Hello, my divine being, and welcome to this week's episode of Confessions of a New Age Goddess. As always, I'm the New Age Goddess herself, Melissa. Joining me today is Angela McKay. Angela is an HR professional by day and a life coach and tarot reader by night. Angela, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes. So, Angela, what part of the country are you joining us from?
I am in Nebraska, USA.
Ooh, never been. Okay.
Yeah, right in the middle.
Yeah, right smack in the middle of the country. Okay, cool. And yeah, if you would like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
I'd love to. So we have a tendency to start with our titles, right? So a human resource executive, a mom, a wife, an employee, a coworker, a daughter, a sister. We have these titles, and part of my story is coming out from underneath those titles. So I had a period of awakening, enlightenment, whatever it is you want to say. You're kind of shoved into these transitionary spaces, to which I really discovered that I had to find myself within those titles. So if I'm talking about myself, I'm instead talking about that I'm funny, I'm brave, I appreciate beauty and nature, I have great perspective. So it was really this journey of finding out who I was underneath those titles so that I could show up more fully and authentically within those spaces that I hold my priorities. So
Definitely. Yeah. I know when people ask me who I am, I say, oh, I'm a light being. And then they're always kind of like, what are you?
yes.
Well, that's not what I was asking you. I'm like, well, but that's the answer to the question. So
Out from underneath those titles that we so traditionally define ourselves as and kind of get lost in along the way.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know I shared with you prior to recording that I did HR for many years myself. And, that was a big part of my identity as well. It was, what do you do? Well, I'm in HR. That's what I do, and then when I kind of stepped away from that realm, or at least the part of it that I used to do that I'm not as into anymore, it was a loss. It was an identity loss for me. And yeah, it's just kind of one of those things where it was like, well, that wasn't me. That wasn't even half of me,
Right.
So it's kind of funny. When you remove these titles and what's really left behind is your true essence. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And then how did you get into the realm of life coaching? I know you started to say you had an awakening, but what really led it to process through that particular medium?
Right. So I've always been the kind of person that people come to talk about whatever it is that they have going on. I have a presence that's very comfortable for them. I'm able to offer perspective. I like to say that I help people to talk to themselves. So it's not that I'm giving them a solution, but I'm really helping them to navigate their space so that they can follow their intuition a little bit closer and go down the right path for them. So this is something that I've always carried with me. I got my background is in communication. I took that into the HR profession. So these were very natural spaces for me to exist within the professional world. However, I just felt a larger calling to take it beyond the corporate space and into a more personal space. So within HR, and you know this, it's for the company and you have your limitations. You can't just dig into everybody's personal life, even if they want you to. So the life coaching really called to me in a way because, I'll just say I work with overwhelmed, driven, do-it-all women to help them take more meaningful time for themselves so that they can catch a relieving breath and do more of what brings them energy and joy. That is naming the space where I was and naming the space that I went into. So these are really in the life coaching space. The women that I found were drawn to me and that I was drawn to help them work through those transitionary spaces. Because you just get to this point where you feel that rub of who you've been and where you're going, and you just don't know quite how to get through that, but you feel something. So opening up my own life coaching practice really allowed me to work with these women in a different way. So within the professional space, the HR, I'm helping to work people through their professional development, but to be able to take that to a more holistic, personal place was really much more fulfilling for me.
Definitely. And I know I learned a long time ago, a coach is different than a consultant. Let's say, like, a coach is really there to guide you, but you still need to do the work. They can't really they can't do it all for you.
The accountability partner.
Yes, accountability, exactly. And then a consultant is more that person that's like, okay, if we want to be up to code, we have to change these things. That's different.
Yep.
It's
All
more
right, here's the prescription.
Yes, yes. So I think a lot of people, when they ask what a coach is, I always say it's a guide. It's really that guide that you're still doing the work. So yeah, that's always been the clarifying difference for me. And also just working in HR, that is such a people focused profession. I mean, a lot of companies are even calling that person now the people and culture coordinator, for example, which makes a lot more sense to me. And even the traditional name human isn't a title. I don't know how many jobs have that, so that's a big giveaway too. So it makes sense to me because there's been a lot of times where you're doing maybe career coaching or you're helping someone with their career path. That's still coaching. That's still, maybe it's in the career sphere and not the life sphere, but it's still, there's a lot of similarities there.
Yes, many.
Yes, yeah, because it is something that they speak to each other. Okay, great. And then you kind of spoke to who your ideal client is, and you did say that it is, stressed out women. It is women that they're maybe coming to a point in their life where they're more established, perhaps in their career. They're more, I am a mom, I am a wife, I am a working woman. What's next? What's next?
Right.
That's what I've come across a lot too in the clients that I work with. I've noted at first, when I first started doing what I do, energy healing, talking to the guides, I thought my clients were going to be these 20-something-year-olds and they were going to be younger than me and this and that. And then I realized, nope, these are all women in their 30s to 50s who are at this next phase of their life, and they're really, now they have more time. Maybe the kids were out of the house or the kids aren't in diapers anymore. They have a little bit more time for themselves and they have a higher level of understanding. So when working with these women, what are some go-to tips or some go-to themes that you see that are always reoccurring with them that helps them get guidance or clarity that you spoke to?
Right. Well, a lot of the times the women that I'm working with are in that kind of place where I was, where you're carrying so many titles at that point that you feel buried underneath of them and you really haven't taken the time to prioritize yourself. You've prioritized everyone and everything else, but you've really lost yourself within that space, and you're kind of in a place where you don't even know how to get it out from underneath that. You don't see how you could possibly find time to discover anything for yourself because you've taken on so much. So I really work in the self-care space, and when I say that, I like to take the surface level stigma out of self-care. Self-care has become a very popular topic that's been boiled down to baths and manicures and grabbing a coffee. And it really can be those things. But really what I'm working with when I'm working with these women in the realm of self-care is not those. I'm working through 7 different areas of self-care, and we're finding places within their lives, within their individual stories, because these have to be individual solutions, where they can take meaningful time for themselves. So something that is truly for them that will have lasting impact. So rather than a bath, it might be setting boundaries and saying no to your mother-in-law. These might be more difficult things that you're working through that on the other side of, you're going to find so much more peace. So really when I'm working with them, we're working through those 7 areas of self-care and finding out where we can find the most impact for that client. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because we are so different as people and we're all at different levels of our journey. So for it to be customized is ideal, and it kind of streamlines the process as well, which I think is so important. Also another thing too, I'm glad you said that it's not just bubble baths, because I did have a episode on that where I had a different guest and we really dived into, yes, it is boundaries, it is saying no when you want to say no instead of yes. And it's also, I think, what a lot of people are coming to realize too, it's making sure that my glass is full so that I can be, in my best version of myself when I am assisting others as well. And even deeper than that, just a lot of clients that I've come into, they're like, there must be something more. There must be something more. Everything looks really good on paper and I don't feel fulfilled and I can't put my finger on it. And I've been having maybe these coincidences that I can't describe the meaning for. And I think that's something that people want to explore, and it is quite interesting, but they don't know how to. And that's when a guide really, really is very helpful for them. Okay. And just getting into exploring, the metaphysical. I know you do work with tarot. Can you kind of explain to us how that gets weaved into everything?
Oh my goodness, I love this. And I'm really happy to be on your podcast, because we do get to dive a little bit deeper into that metaphysical side and say things like awakenings and enlightenments and just these things that you don't necessarily talk about mainstream all the time. Within my coaching space, I do refer to myself as an intuitive life coach. While I have my professional skills, my certifications to lean on for coaching, all the technical stuff is there. I really do embrace my clairsenses within coaching. So I'm an empath, which is a clairsentient. I feel feelings of other people, clairaudience. So I do hear my guides and the guides of others, which really assists within that coaching space. It's interesting because it might be mid-session and all of a sudden I have this fully formed thought about something that I have no right having a fully formed thought about, because it doesn't exist within me at all, but it came from somewhere, and it came from somewhere to deliver to the client that I'm working with, as well as clairvoyance. So all of that, and then coupled with the tarot piece. And I know you say tarot and I say tarot.
Yeah, I know.
Over the tarot world.
I've heard it said many different ways, but I like saying it that way.
Right. I love that space. It was an art that I had a natural calling to. And as soon as I started with it, I didn't struggle at all with collective meaning versus intuitive meaning. I was really able to settle into that. I read for myself. I read for others, and the accuracy and the extra layer, it was just, I fell in love with it right away. As I went into the coaching space. So you go from this professional HR, and then you go into life coach, intuitive life coach, and tarot.
Yeah.
So I mean, these things don't necessarily all match up traditionally, but I really love adding tarot into my coaching sessions. Clients do have the option. If they don't want it, they can say they don't want it. I've not had one say yet that they don't want it. And those who have not had an experience with it before, it's their favorite part of the coaching sessions. And it's because it's one thing to hear yourself tell yourself something. It's another thing to hear someone else tell you something. And then the third level, when you lay out those cards and your intuition is speaking to you and you're looking at them going, what? How did you know? Yeah. It's just that extra layer of confirmation, of affirmation, of you going on the right path, or you discovering your right path. It's just such a magical piece of that coaching conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I used to read tarot for a while, and I got really into it, and it was to the point where that's all I was doing. And so I had
I've been there.
Yeah. And I was just like, I'm doing nothing else all day. So then I had to stop. It was just something I had to stop my journey with it. But yeah, it is quite interesting. And there's so many different types of decks. I think a lot of people don't even realize. I just think it's a traditional, but yeah, you can have, a cat one or all these different types of themes. And then also, a fun fact that a lot of people don't know either is tarot is very closely knit to astrology. And there's certain cards, like I'm a Capricorn, for whatever reason, that card is correlated to the devil. Not sure why, but
I love the devil. That's one of my favorite cards.
Yeah.
I love the devil.
It has a stigma, but it's actually not that bad.
Right, but that's not what it means. And people do carry those fears of tarot when they haven't had an experience with it, of getting the devil or death or just any of those quote unquote negative cards. But life is full of light and shade, and those cards are full of light and shade.
Yeah, or the tower.
Yes.
It doesn't look good, but it's actually not the worst thing. Yeah. So, yeah, I used to have fun with that and do readings, but it was just kind of one of those things where you gotta try on a lot of different hats or a lot of different modalities and see which ones really stick for you. Because again, like we said, we're all different. Awesome.
Well, that's what we speak of all the different decks. I admit I have a number of them, but I mean, each of them too, I'll do every time I get a new deck, I do a deck interview just so I can see how I'm going to best work with that deck, what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are going to be. And it's interesting that it really does fall into those spaces. So depending on what I'm working on for myself or for a client, and I also do tarot readings alone outside of life coaching sessions. Each deck kind of has its different vibe to bring to that reading, whatever the topic is. It's just, I love it.
Yeah, and the different types of layouts, and it's very in depth. I think a lot of people just think it's like pulling cards, but it's more than that. It's more
Well,
complicated.
it is, and there's so much in the imagery. So any card that I pull for one person in one situation, if I could pull that same card in a different situation for a different person, there's imagery in that card that stands out differently than it did before that might take you completely away from the collective meaning, but it's a message that was meant to be delivered to that person in that moment based on
Mhm.
their energy, based on their guidance.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And there's been times where I've done readings even on myself, and I did a reading about something and it gave me this type of result. And then, a couple of weeks later, I asked the same exact question. And the results were dramatically different because I changed. And
Mhm.
I think that's another thing too. People are like, well, you said blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but things have changed in 2 weeks. You've changed, the
Yep.
world changed, your partner's changed. So that's another thing that I think people need to keep in mind too, that they
Right.
always.
Right. It reads the energy of a moment. So I describe myself as a coaching consultative style reader. I'm not a predictive reader.
Right.
So I'm not going to predict your future based off of tarot. Many people do function that way, and that's great. That's just not how I connect to it. So it's really within the moment, reading the energy of you within your current space, what it is that you have in front of you, and where we can go next.
Yes, perfect, perfect. And then I was interested in speaking about this. I know you said when you talk to the guides. So when you speak to the guides and messages come through and they're not from you, I know it's a message from a guide because of the wording they use. They use words I never use, or words that are like really like old timey. Like it is
Yeah.
really a word, but it was maybe popular in the 1500s. So I don't use that word today. Or they'll give words like a double meaning, like the way that they'll make me pronounce the word, it has like two different meanings and it's not even really a word. So how do you, when you communicate with the guides, how do you know, hey, this isn't Angela, it's from a higher power?
For me, there's it's interesting. There's two different things. Generally, within the moment, it's the clarity of how it comes through. So, like I said, it comes through as a fully collected thought, a fully collected statement that I know based on what I know of the person, what I know of their situation, and what my skill set is. That thought would have never come from anything that I formulated. That
Mhm.
is something that has been given to me. And I always point this way, I look this way, because that's the direction that it's delivered to me from.
Okay.
So that's another way I know too, is it's just a sense of coming from that direction.
No, that
Um,
makes sense.
the other thing that I've discovered is if I don't fully lean into that, if I don't fully hear and recognize and deliver that message, when I'm done talking with the person, there's an energy buzz that continues. And I
Mhm.
feel it mostly within my ears. It's just this constant energy buzz that I know whatever it was, I didn't complete it. And I get the words for it. And the only thing I can do is reach back out to the person, generally by email at that point, and say, excuse me, but there's still this messaging that's continued, and I need to deliver that to you. And once I do, it stops. That energy stops. That constant thinking, because it will just rotate in my mind until I get rid of it. That constant thinking, it's done. It's gone. So it's an incredibly interesting process that I had to learn to recognize was part of me, that I had to learn to embrace was part of me, and I had to learn to speak for it being part of me. And that whole process of becoming authentically you
Mm.
can be a
Mhm.
very hard process, because we know that people can look at you and go, to
Yeah,
which you're like, no, for real.
definitely, definitely. Yeah. And I like how you said authentically you, because that could be something that yeah is outside of the norm, or something that it took you a while to even discover because you thought you had to be a certain type of way. So that's a whole other episode right
Well,
there.
yes, and that ties back to a question you asked earlier about when I'm working with people, something that commonly comes up for them.
Yeah.
This is actually one of the biggest spaces, is stepping into their authenticity, because through those titles, through those responsibilities, they felt the need to be something for somebody else,
Yes.
either for external validation or whatever it was. They felt the need to be something for somebody else. So when we're looking at their space and we're looking at self-care, part of that really is stripping it back to, who did you become for somebody? And how did you set yourself aside when you did?
Mm,
And
mhm.
in that process, part of it is kind of, it's re-embracing who you were or discovering who you are now. Both of those things happen because we grow, we evolve. So some things we leave behind and we transition into something else. It's really embracing who it is you are, so that you can bring forward your true self, your strengths, so that you're connecting with the right people and you're operating on the frequency that feels the best to you. Some people are afraid to bring that person forward. They're afraid that they're going to get judged or ashamed or whatever it is. But when you leave that fear behind and you start really functioning within yourself and your authenticity, you connect with the right people.
Yes,
And
yes,
you
exactly.
yeah, and you just function on a higher level. You are going where you're supposed to be, and you're not going to feel that constant friction of functioning as someone you weren't or aren't supposed to be.
Yeah. And like you said, you're going to make the right connections, because if I'm not being who I truly am to the fullest extent that I can be, at least at this level of understanding, I am not going to get the right type of jobs coming to me, the right type of people in my life, because I'm not even showcasing who I fully am or who
Right.
I authentically am. So I think that's another thing too. People are like, oh, I feel like I'm really close, or I have friends that are okay, but I'm not super connecting with them. It's because they're connecting with whatever version you're showing to the world,
Yes.
wherever you're at. So it affects more. It affects more than just you. It affects experiences, and it can just keep growing from there. And also, it always makes me think, I don't know if everyone agrees with me on this, but it always makes me think that there's parallel realities. And I'm in the reality where I'm like, maybe operating at 75% Melissa. And what
Right.
does that look like? But if I was 100% Melissa, I would be in this other plane or this other path that would
Right.
be more fulfilling.
Right.
Yeah. So something I think about for sure. Okay, great. And then I know you talked about, kind of like the services you offer and little tips and things of that nature, but what really would it look like to work with you, if it's a one-on-one, or if it's a more consistent ongoing thing? How do you kind of advertise that?
Well, I have both of those things. So, my coaching package, I'm working with a client on a coaching journey where we're taking them really through 4 different phases. The first phase I call where you are. So, we're looking at what their life looks like right now, not what it has before, not what they want it to, but what does your life look like right now? What is your schedule? What is your routine? And we really start to evaluate that. So, later in phases, we can start to break that apart a little bit, change it, do something that works a little bit better for them, and use that time more efficiently so that they have meaningful impact for themselves. The second phase is who you are. And oh, I love it. I love the who you are phase, because this is moving all the noise of who you think you should be.
Mm,
And we're really focusing on who you are, what you value, what your strengths are, how you can put those forward into what you're working on, but also how you can work for yourself the best. So one of them, there's some character traits that you really look at those and you generally see them externally, but you can look at them and say, well, I could do that for me rather than somebody else.
mm,
I can do that for me. So it's this really fantastic process of really starting to love yourself more, embrace yourself more in your healthy states and your unhealthy states, just starting to recognize why it is that you behave the way that you do, and how you can get closer to sitting in the presence of someone that you want to be, someone that feels a little bit more peace within their life, a little bit more strength in what they do. The
yeah.
third phase is where you're going. So once we've discovered all of that, we're really going to look at those 7 areas of self-care and identify which ones we can get the most impact. And there's so much crossover between them, which ones we can get the most impact, and start changing things up a little bit for you so that you can find those deep breaths, so you can do more of what brings you energy and joy. And then by the fourth phase, I call it your present, which is kind of a play on mindfulness too, of really sitting within this new space where you've learned to love yourself more, you've learned to be more authentically you, you've learned to put some time in your day that fills you up so that you can show up more fully for your people and your priorities, and your set. um, for people who aren't ready for the whole coaching package, I do have a single session called the Feel Better Now assessment, where we're going to take a look at those 7 areas of self-care and just find one quick and easy way that we can adjust a schedule so that you can start feeling better now.
Mm.
And that way you're not having to commit to the whole coaching package if you don't want to at this moment.
Yeah, and I think that's great to meet people where they're at,
Mhm.
right? To not
Yep.
overload someone maybe, or to not give someone
Right.
else not enough feedback. So that's good. And then,
Well, and that's what I see it as is I'm here for the people that could use my help.
yes,
So there's no need for me to take what I do and throw it on to anybody. Wherever you are in your space, whatever it is that you feel you could use, here's these services that I have. And if that feels like a great fit and this feels like a really great coaching relationship for you and that you could relate, then wherever you are, we'll get you somewhere better.
exactly. Not one size fits all, like we said earlier.
Right.
And then another point too is I think when people see how magical they really are, because not everyone sees that in themselves.
No,
I hate to say that, but
they don't, and they might not. They might
yeah.
not in this round, right?
Yeah. So if everyone did see that about themselves, then they would see it about others, right? And if they truly love themselves, they wouldn't be hurting other people. It would be impossible. It would be impossible to me. Like, I mean, if you really care about the earth, you don't litter. It's that kind of thing. It's
Mhm.
that kind of perspective from my standing point. So I think it is imperative because it just kind of brings you down a path where more and more revelations come up and more good
Well,
comes out of it.
right. And what you're speaking of, that really comes up in the who you are phase of the coaching journey too, because the more that you start to reflect on who you are, what you bring to the table, and why you act or react the way that you do, those healthy and unhealthy states, um, the more empathy you start to extend towards others.
Yes.
Because a way that they would have acted previously might have driven you up a wall, but you start to gain more empathy as to why they're reacting the way that they do, and that it's not you. It's not you. It's them on their journey. It's a reflection that they're having. So you're just kind of back on your own path of your own healing, of your own discovery, and being worried less about where somebody else is in theirs.
Yes, because one thing that I've noticed too is that point that you brought up about having empathy. If someone is, maybe they're a complainer or something that is triggering me. I've complained in my life. I know I have. So that could be a part of it too. And more understanding. Maybe they're complaining because they're really an anxious person and that temporarily relieves their anxiety, even though it actually does more harm than good, but they haven't gotten the coping skills yet for it. So
Right.
when you become understanding like that, it doesn't trigger you as much because yes, you grow that sense of empathy and you just kind of meet them where they're at.
Well, and it's twofold because on one hand, you're understanding them more, you're extending more empathy to them. And on your side, you've come to understand where your boundaries are, what sort of conversations you feel more comfortable in, where you need to remove yourself from conversations, and how you don't walk into those as much. So if that complaining personality does kind of, you feel that drain, when you're there, you start to recognize that more in yourself, and you start to draw that boundary for you of, this isn't healthy for me.
Mhm.
So then when we're talking about, connections and being authentically you, you start to feel that a bit more as to where you feel great and where you don't feel great, and walking towards which one is good for you.
Yeah, and I think when you start to understand yourself more and you know what resonates and what does not resonate, yeah, it becomes certain relationships, maybe, friends leave that weren't on the same frequency as you anymore, and that's fine, temporary
Okay.
people in your life.
Yeah.
But it's even more than that. I mean, when I started going through that evolution, it was like the way I dressed was totally different.
Yes.
Like there's certain colors, I can't even wear them anymore
Or
because
fabrics. Like certain
yeah,
fabrics I just cannot tolerate the feel of.
like when I look at I'm like, oh my God, it's not that it's out of style. It's just that I just can't wear this anymore. I don't know. I can't even put my finger on it. Or
I know.
I like redecorated my space. I got rid of so many things I didn't need. Like I used less cosmetics. I mean, it was just,
Mhm.
you think it's just going to be, oh, I'm just going to stop talking to a certain person. And it turns into
Right.
this whole
It's,
thing.
yeah, it's a whole thing. It's
Yeah.
a whole thing. And along the way, you look at it going, what is going on? And I think that's part of what drew me to coaching as well, is I was going through these different phases in my life. Um, to have somebody that you could talk to and say, like, what on earth? These things that I'm feeling, these changes that I'm making, you can feel really alone in that space. And it's really hard to find people to connect to when you're in those transitionary spaces. So to be somebody that someone could connect to in those transitionary spaces, affirm for them that where they are was where they were meant to be. And as long as we work through it, better stuff is on the other side. Like, let's walk through it. You have
Yes.
to go to it and through it. There's no escaping it.
Yeah, you do have to go through it for sure, for sure. And also another thing, yes, you need a guide. And I've always been an advocate for community. I
Mhm.
need community because yes, I need this safe space, but I also need other people where I can bounce these ideas off of and brainstorm and see what worked for them and see these different type of perspectives and then turn it into like this brand new thing. I've always been someone where I need my tribe, because if I don't, I'm not going to progress as much as I need to, nor is anybody else. And yeah, you want to feel like, yeah, I'm not crazy. And also, yeah, how do I move past this? What is the next step? Is this the right direction? You know, it's a whole process, and it's not something that would really benefit anyone to go through it by themselves, you know? So,
And it's not linear. I mean, there is so much push and pull and up and down within that process that you can feel like you've really got it together one day. And then the next day, like you're in complete hermit mode or high priestess mode, where you're, underneath in these, waves of I don't even know what. And you just don't feel like you've got that strength coming forward anymore. I mean, the ride on it is incredible.
yes, yes. And I think it's also when you get like you said, when you have to go through it, and that process of going through it, all of the maybe empowerment you get or the strength that you get, or just figuring out how to do things and how to overcome things, that really is the whole thing. It's not the destination. Like, I think a lot of people, they get hung up on results. At least I used to be one of those people, and it had to be like, but I'm seeing progress, but I'm progressing. That's everything. That is the whole thing. The result, that's just something that came from the process.
Well, it's funny. Earlier you said you're Capricorn, so you've
Yes.
got that with the devil as your card.
Yes.
So I'm a Pisces, which is matched up with the moon. So I'm a Pisces sun, but I'm a Capricorn moon. And both of those cards are one of those cards that are very representative of shade,
Yes.
of shadow.
Yes.
And people do just about everything they can to not deal with that shadow side, even though there's so much in that shadow side, as in contrast to your light, that forms this whole person. And a lot of that is about walking through it, discovering it, owning it, and loving it, so that you can be that whole self. One of my decks, it's the Prisma Visions Tarot by James R. Eads. The devil card is actually depicted as this kind of creepy looking forest. And I always think of that when that card comes up, because you've got to walk through that.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to walk through that to fully discover yourself. To avoid it just for avoidance won't help you grow.
Mm-hmm.
To walk through it and stay there is unhealthy. But to walk through it for self-discovery and to take with you what matters, and to leave behind you what's not good for you is just part of that whole journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is something that I don't think we like, everyone can kind of come across it in their own way, but we know there's certain people who don't do the work. There's certain people who are just kind of,
they're going to avoid the forest, or they're going to get stuck in it. I mean, these are options.
There's many options. And I mean, I think you always have the one that's best for you available. People don't always take the best option, but it's kind of like, well, then you have to come back and do it all over again. That's if you want to do that. I feel
still there.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it all done in this life. It's like I've come so far already. Might as well just finish it,
Right.
Whatever. Okay, cool. All right. So Angela, was there any other messages that you wanted to send us off with? Anything that we didn't get to that you would like to speak upon?
Not necessarily. I suppose I think we had talked a little bit about, an in the moment fix. And then I'll kind of close with what I have available for free. But like I said, a lot of this is so individualized. So in the coaching realm, that's really where I walk into, because a lot of people, when they look at that self-care world, they try to bring into their life what someone else has done, and then it doesn't work. And then they either feel they failed, or that self-care is a failure. And it's just that what fits someone else isn't what fits you. But in the moment, so if you're stressed, if you're overwhelmed in the moment, the other day I shared a quote from an unknown source. I got it here in front of me, that just says, on particularly rough days, when I'm sure I can't possibly endure more, I remind myself that my track record for getting through bad days has been 100%, and that's pretty good. I love that quote. And I love it because it allows you to validate the space that you're in. It's not toxic positivity. It's not invalidating the emotions and the feelings that you're having. It's acknowledging that where you are just kind of stinks, but you've been in moments like this before, and you always get through them. So it's a moment that you can then focus on that take a deep breath. Remind yourself that one of my favorite phrases is, you're where your feet are. You're not in your past, you're not in your future, you are where your feet are. And then decide, what can I do next? Even if it's small, just what can I do next, so that you can stop that spiraling stress and overwhelm that starts happening in your mind, where you get that, freeze kind of mentality about you. So while I don't do one size fits all, I think that's a really great place for people to use, or to be in a moment when they find them self-stressed or overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Um, as far as where people can start, so I've talked about the coaching package and the Feel Better Now assessment, but on my website, which is AngelaMcKayLLC.com, there's a free guide called 7 Ways to Self-Care. And what that guide is going to do is, it's going to tell you what self-care actually is.
Mm-hmm.
That it could be the manicure, but it's probably not. But it's going to highlight those 7 areas of self-care that I work with clients on, describing what they are and giving some prompting questions. So if there's any one of them that calls to you, you can spend a little bit more time within that space, journal about it, try something new, whatever it is, to really kickstart your self-care journey. If you're not quite in a place where you want to bring on a coach or do anything else like that. So it's a pretty comprehensive guide that people can just use on their own.
Yeah, definitely. And then outside of that, where else can we find you if you wanted to promote yourself, all of that?
Oh, for sure. At the bottom of my website, I've got links to my Facebook and Instagram is where I am primarily. I'm also on LinkedIn because I am that HR executive who owns her own intuitive life coaching business. And then TikTok, I'm not on so much. I love TikTok. It's so much fun. But I just do a few card pulls on there, not too much. But at the bottom of my website are all those social links.
Okay. And then I can link that in the show notes as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, well, this is just another great example of how spirituality and the use of different methods and teachings can really make great changes in your daily life. As always, if you are looking for a way to relieve stress and anxious thoughts, or looking to gain some clarity, you can always book a Reiki energy healing session or Akashic Records reading session with me at thenewAgeGoddess.com. Much love and namaste.
Take care.